This is an incredible honor to be in Tulsa. It's an honor to be in Oklahoma because Tulsa was once the poster child for everything that is wrong with the National Flood Insurance Program and with disaster relief in the United States. A place which averaged a presidentially declared disaster every other year. And that was normal, that was business as usual. And a group of people, a group of heroes, got together and decided to do things differently. To do things like we see out here. To detain water so that we could have development, which is necessary for our economic survival, development which will be driven by demographic pressures, and yet not have floods. And you folks have gone for 25 years here in Tulsa without a flood. It's an honor to be in Oklahoma, which has shown us an incredible path forward with respect to disaster risk reduction. And specifically with respect to saving lives by building safe rooms to protect people's families, to protect their schools, protect everyone, and it's an ongoing process. When I was a federal coordinating officer for FEMA in my career, I was working some disasters in the South that were combined flood and tornado disasters. And we said, well, gee, what do you do for some type of hazard mitigation, harm prevention for tornadoes? And the answer was safe rooms. So we did a nationwide research program, finding out everything we could about safe rooms for tornado mitigation. And what we found was 6 sheets of Xerox paper describing a program to basically use 2x6s to retrofit an interior, usually bathroom space or large closet space in a home, to make it a bit stronger so that you had a better chance of survival. That was the sum and substance of the research available on safe rooms. Here in Oklahoma, folks have developed the concept of above-ground safe rooms, which are particularly important in floodplain areas because you really would prefer not to go into a safe room from a tornado and drown in an accompanying rainstorm. Not a particularly safe thing to do. And we have prepared a report, which we're going to be talking about, called Hide from the Wind. And Annie and Albert and the Tulsa partners have it. It was done by research by Alessandra Girolamo, Dr. Girolamo, and Patton, Tim Lovell, and with a tremendous amount of volunteer support from a whole bunch of people, we put together this report that validates what Dr. Dennis Milletti has been saying, that we need to have a common message, in this case, you need a safe room, delivered by multiple different respected sources, everyone from the State Emergency Management Director to various mayors, county managers, planners, architects, engineers, and lenders. People that put up billboards that said, we'll give you a low-interest loan for a safe room. Incredible credit union that will give zero-interest loans in order for you to build a safe room. It's multiple different messages, common single message, you need a safe room, that has resulted in a transformation that is ongoing in Oklahoma. More and more, literally thousands of safe rooms being built, safe rooms now being put into Oklahoma schools, Tulsa school system, for safety with respect to tornadic activity. And I think this charts us a path forward for all of our natural hazards. And in fact, for preparedness in general. We need to have common messages delivered by multiple sources, government, non-government, person to person. In Oklahoma, I was just talking to Albert Ashwood this morning, the State Emergency Management Director, who you'll be hearing from later. And Albert points out that used to be, when we got beyond just knowing a little bit about a few 2x6s, the only place where you could go for a safe room was a lumberyard. Now there are manufacturers, private market entrepreneurs who've set up in business to build safe rooms. Whole industry has sprung up. And this comes from multiple sources. It comes from people in the National Weather Service, the Severe Weather Warning System, Office in Norman, Oklahoma. It comes from weather forecasters talking about this. It comes from the media putting out pictures of people emerging from their safe rooms alive when many other people died. So it shows us not just the Oklahoma story, not just the Tulsa story of how to deal with floods, how to go from being the poster child for everything that's wrong about how we are doing development. It shows us a path forward. This is a pilot. This is a pilot of an effort on the part of the folks at the Natural Hazard Mitigation Association to develop a curriculum, a set of knowledge that will help folks at the local level, grassroots, local people, state people, who want to interject into conversations going on about resilience. Knowledgeable thoughts on disaster risk reduction. We are passing out copies of all the slides so that you can take notes on them. So we're really looking for your feedback. We want to, with this set of presentations here in Tulsa, and also with webinars, to help facilitate knowledgeable thoughts being interjected into conversations that are going on about resilience, sustainability, about disasters. And we want to give folks tools and knowledge so that they can be part of those discussions. Many people talk about resilience, and they really talk about it in a way that is very narrow and will focus on their pet passions, which often have to do with reduction in carbon emissions, which is very worthwhile. But we want to look also at reduction in overall disasters for the future. We want to take the knowledge that has been garnered by the Resilient Neighbors Network, which you'll be hearing about, by folks from Tulsa, folks from Charlotte-Mecklenburg, that have shown a path forward for the rest of the nation. I want to first describe a little bit about the Natural Hazard Mitigation Association. It was formed in 2008 to bring together people who care about reducing disasters. What we call hazard mitigation, our friends in the climate change community would call it climate adaptation. And we want to look at local action through the states up through a national framework. And it includes individuals, organizations, planners, practitioners, community officials, consultants, and just about everybody else. And I sure wish it would include all of you. Those of you who paid for registration today, paid their $50, will automatically be included in NHMA in the future. So you'll be members and you'll be hearing from us regularly. We have a strategic plan, and it talks about developing partnerships with people and individuals. It talks about promoting effective practices, which is what we're talking about today. We facilitate training and education, and we strongly advocate for sound policy. And we do that very vigorously nationally and at the state level. We're going to be talking throughout this about 4 initiatives. One we call Living Mosaic. We used to call that patchwork quilt, and Katie and I will be talking about that later. One is the Resilient Neighbors Network. It's a network that was funded by FEMA through a grant to NHMA to help us figure out how we can get communities talking together, sharing knowledge. And that is increasingly getting its work done by sharing peer-to-peer networking of knowledge. And we have a curriculum that we are in the process of developing with your help. And then we have all sorts of outreach to non-traditional partners, people that are not normally considered part of disaster risk reduction. The Living Mosaic is something that I had hoped to have available for you today. We didn't quite make it, but Katie, when do you think we're going to be able to roll that out, that we can give it out in draft? Within a month, would you say? It'll be up on the NHMA website. Resilient Neighbors Network, we have 5 members of the Resilient Neighbors Network here, and I would ask them to stand, please. Tim and Bill. And these folks are available to talk to you about what they are doing in their communities. And I really, keep an eye out on them. All of them are leaders in mitigation, one way or another, or climate adaptation. And then we have outreach to non-traditional partners. Everyone from the Brookings Institute, I was honored to be asked to co-author a publication for them on how to reduce the federal deficit by doing hazard mitigation. And we were able to document $40 billion of savings to the federal budget by increasing higher standards. Center for Clean Air Policy, the climate, the folks that really want to reduce carbon emissions are willing to listen to us about our disaster risk reduction thing, and it's great. Reinsurance companies, the American Bar Association, we have a resilience initiative underway there. The Department of the Treasury, talking to them about the advantages of catastrophic insurance. Harvard Graduate School of Design, Don Watson and I co-teach at the Harvard Graduate School of Design. The Kresge Foundation is doing an incredible job of knowledgeably and thoughtfully funding resilience activities around the nation. The Garrison Institute, wonderful different groups. And then we have this Disaster Risk Reduction Ambassador Program, which we intend over the next 12 to 14 months to turn into a program where you actually get a credential that we tentatively have entitled a Disaster Risk Reduction Ambassador, but up for any other name. This is the pilot. You know, if you want a different name, we can call it that. Something similar, I think, to the Association of State Floodplain Managers, Certified Floodplain Manager. Something similar, but to a much lesser scale, to the credential that one gets as a AICP or something like that from the American Planning Association. But I want to talk about Mother Nature. Boy, she gets the rap for a lot of stuff. Does Mother Nature cause disasters? Question. What do you think? Is that what she's in business for? I think Dr. Gilbert White, the late great Dr. Gilbert White, had a different view of that. And he said that floods are acts of God or nature, but flood losses are largely acts of man. And we've got to face up to that. Whether you call that from the perspective of stewardship of the earth, or economic protection, or environmental protection, or just fundamental good business of government, we've got to recognize that we're doing it to ourselves. These are acts of man. It's not fair to call them natural disasters. These are generally man-caused disasters. We want to solve that problem through resilience. We've got to recognize that the enemy is us. We're doing it to ourselves with improper building based on yesterday's climate. And as the climate changes or evolves or is uncertain, we're going to have worse and worse disasters as we have more and more people, more and more valued investment in areas that are just plain hazardous. It's just so. So what's the single best form of climate adaptation and hazard mitigation? What's the one? Build safely. Get it done right. Get it done right from the get-go. What's the single, and there is only one, best form of disaster relief? It's only one that is the best form of disaster relief. Get emergency managers in the room. What's the best form of disaster relief? Never have the disaster in the first place. Thank you. You get a ticket. Katie, could you do me a favor? In the plastic bag, can you get me out my strip of tickets? You get the first ticket of the day. We're going to have rewards for good performance. Fundamental aspect of changing behavior and having good behavior is rewarding good behavior and disrewarding bad behavior. We're not doing disrewards, just the tickets. No disasters at all. Is this achievable? Well, probably not. But it's a worthwhile goal, isn't it? Strive for it. Thanks a lot. Can you tear him off a ticket? So what causes flooding? Well, this is from Don Watson's fantastic, oh, I'm sorry, this is from the USDA. But it's in your book, isn't it, Don? Isn't this slide? It is. What causes it is we're changing our impermeable surfaces. We're changing our permeable surfaces to impermeable. We're having more runoff. And as we change our floods, the nature of floods, thanks a lot. We're screwing things up. So, who's responsible for the safety and security of your family? This is, of course, a FEMA responsibility, correct? Isn't that what's in all the papers? Oh no, it's Albert's. It's Albert's response. Oh no, it's not Albert's either. Is Albert responsible for any particular family protection? His. Jim Schwab's responsible for his. We need to think broadly and seriously, including sea level rise. Now you might say, why am I talking about sea level rise in Tulsa? Well, you'll see, because all y'all get to pay for coastal disasters. It's real simple. We've got to stop making things worse. The most fundamental aspect of hazard mitigation plans that I see that we are not really thinking about is basically saying what I believe fundamentally Tulsa has said. Future development will not make things worse with respect to flooding. And Tulsa adopted, I believe, the first comprehensive standards in the nation of detention, retention, for subdivision by subdivision, to make sure that things didn't get even worse than they already were. And we will have many opportunities to do this, but right now we have a system that rewards dangerous and irresponsible behavior. We need to remove the perverse incentives that we'll be talking about. There's no question that climate is changing. Climate has always been changing throughout our entire recorded history on this planet. It's a constant set of changing. We have to stop making things worse, and we've got to make some changes. There's no question that trends of flood, earthquake, wildfire losses are increasing dramatically, and demographic changes are indicating much more severe challenges for the future. We can see more and more people moving into coastal areas, into floodplain areas, into areas that will inevitably have earthquakes and wildfires. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some damages. Hurricane Camille was the first disaster that I ever worked, 1969, Mississippi coast, and it was horrific. 250 dead people, a lot of homes damaged, a lot of dollar damage for the time, homes destroyed. Category 5 hurricane. People that dealt with that said, son, look around, this is the worst you're ever going to see. You will not see a worse disaster than this. And then we had Andrew come along, which was largely a windstorm. And I've got a reason, I'm going somewhere with this. Stick with me, I know this is hurricanes, stick with me on this. 2 million people evacuated, triumph of evacuation preparedness and planning, 250,000 people displaced, lots of homes destroyed, about $44 billion in damages. Horrific event. I got to work that down in Florida for multiple months. Then you had Hurricane Ivan, again, a triumph of evacuation planning and preparedness, did a tremendous amount of damage. That's one of the 4 Florida hurricanes of 2004. Then we had Hurricane Katrina and Rita come along and caused some damage in New Orleans and the surrounding areas. But let's look first at the area not New Orleans. A horrifically bad disaster. But if you'll notice, not as many people evacuated as in both Ivan and Andrew. A lot more people displaced, tremendous amount of damage, but not nearly as much as Hurricane Katrina. Very serious and awful event. But what the heck, let's look at it with New Orleans too. And we go from a really terrible disaster to our nation's worst disaster, save only on one scale, and that's the number of people killed, which was eclipsed by the Galveston flood of 1900. So you say, well, so what? I mean, that's, why are you telling us this in Tulsa? Well, there's a reason. What happened is over a period of about 18 hours, the levees failed or were overtopped in New Orleans, and we went from a horrifically bad disaster to our nation's worst disaster. Where else can levees fail or be overtopped? Any, what do you think? Certainly in New England, all over the country. Y'all got any of them close by to here? You got 3. I'll give you a takeaway message with respect to levees. With the exception of 2 levee systems, 2, to the best of my knowledge, every other levee system in the United States of America is designed to fail. Not maliciously designed to fail, but they are designed to fail. They are overtopped, they are made out of earth, generally speaking, and they will overtop, and they are designed in such a way that they do not meet the standards of good engineering anywhere in the civilized world. In the civilized world, we design levees, for example, Great Britain, Germany, Holland, if it's protecting people to about a 10,000-year level. And the Dutch are thinking about going to a 100,000-year level of protection. 1 in 100,000 here. In those places, the civilized world that is, we would design levees that would protect farmlands to a 1 in 1,200 years or 1 in 2,000 years. In the United States, we have, with the exception of 2 levee systems, designed them for protection to the 1% flood level, 1 in 100 years. That does not meet good engineering practice. Period. End of story. There's no question that disasters are bad and getting worse. These are numbers from Munich Reinsurance. The funny thing is, if you look on the red part of this, that's earthquake, tsunami, and it kind of bounces all over, but it's not a real upward vector. Not that much on earthquake. Now that could change in a heartbeat if the Cascadia Fault has a really bad day, or if New Madrid goes here in the central United States, or if California, isn't there anymore, or whatever happens. But it's the wind and flood disasters that are getting worse, and that is driven by the demographic pressures into those areas. It is driven highly by tremendous increase in the level of investment in these areas. When I was a kid, I knew people that had a beach shack, and it was a shack. It was uninsulated, kind of had sketchy plumbing, and it was a very low-value property, and they would periodically be flooded out and disappear, and they'd get replaced. Now we have McMansions in those same areas. So, another question for the group for a ticket. And these tickets are valuable. We're gonna do a drawing, and the drawing will be for something that you decide what's it going to be. It's going to be gift cards, probably 2 at $50. So these are worthwhile. How much has the federal government spent on disasters since 1983? Think about it. Easy to remember number. Anybody? For a ticket? Go.
2
How much? 2-3 what? 2 trillion. No, sir. Close. You got the idea. Give me a little bit more on that. Try again. If I tell you that's not correct. No, we're going the wrong way. 1 trillion. $1 trillion. And you know, $1 trillion here and $1 trillion there, gosh, next thing you know, you're talking about real money. $1 trillion on disasters. That isn't the economic consequences. That isn't the misery and the suffering and, oh yeah, the loss of life. This is serious business. This increase in disasters, especially flood losses, this wasn't supposed to happen. We had a study. It was paid for, cash money, by HUD at that time that conclusively showed that with the standards of the National Flood Insurance Program, we would see a decline in flood disasters by the year 2000 to 2025. I mean, we had a study right in our hand. It showed that, and it didn't work. Let me be clear. The National Flood Insurance Program is, in my professional opinion, the most cost-effective program of hazard mitigation in the history of this nation. But it hasn't quite taken us far enough. It took us from what was well documented as normal construction practice in the United States of America. Corps of Engineers calculated this out, that we normally would build to a 40-year level of protection. That was what they found based on surveys around the country, 40-year level of protection. And we took it to sort of a 100-year level of protection. So it was clearly a better, but we need to improve the flood insurance program. And there are people working on that right now. We have a mapping advisory council. We have a lot of work ongoing, and we need to make it different and better to have higher standards. One way of doing that was pioneered here in Tulsa, and it's the community rating system. Building higher, building better, folks like Charlotte Mecklenburg doing this, but there are limitations. Particularly in mountainous areas, we have limitations on what we can do with flood insurance when we have whole sides of creeks disappear. But it's a really good idea to be involved in community rating. It's really a good idea to take a look at the tremendous savings that can be achieved by building safely and properly over a period of time. You can really save some serious money on a home. There are people like the Swiss Re Insurance Company that will show you how improved building codes have a tremendous payback. Much more so than other possible systems. Yet, even people like Swiss Re, for another ticket here, take a look at these. We're talking about options for improving things. What way of doing things differently and better beyond floating production systems and levees and wetlands restoration, beach nourishment and building codes, what could you do with respect to reducing disaster damages that even our friends at Swiss Re missed from this list? Not building in stupid places. I'll take that as an answer. I mentioned that we have sort of a perverse system. I want to talk about our system of disaster relief in our nation. It's a study from the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, and the citation, the link is given here. talks about how we have paid for disasters in the past. And if you'll notice, before Hurricane Katrina, private market insurance, this is not flood insurance. They took flood insurance off the table. They just looked at disaster relief, private market insurance, federal stuff, charity, and all the rest of this. And you can see here, I hope you can see here, yeah, individuals paid about 10%. Now this is on presidentially declared disasters. You have a wildly different situation when you don't have a presidentially declared disaster. So you can see federal aid is about 26%, charity, state and local government, okay? After Katrina, we have insurance paying a little bit more, goes from 57 to 58%, and we have federal aid of 69%. And if you'll notice, that totals more than 100%. We have a system now in our nation, particularly when we have the post-disaster HUD Community Development Block Grant Special Appropriations from Congress, that equals $1.25 of damage of funds paid per dollar of damage. And they very drolly note that some businesses or individuals may not have been fully reimbursed despite that surplus. And any of you that have dealt with people that have been in New York or down in Louisiana know that this extra money, this surplus of 25%, didn't end up in the pockets of the disaster survivors. So we have a system that is not properly accounting for the true costs. We need to make things different and better. Flood insurance can be an important mechanism in that. It can be made better through local action, through the community rating system. Tulsa, for years, had the highest rating in the nation in the community rating system. Now it has it's number two. It's number two. There's lots of ways of doing things through CRS. There's lots of ways of saving money, and I would urge this on all of you. In Oklahoma, there are only 13 communities in the community rating system. And I know that there are reasons for that. I know there's a lot of paperwork, but it is not so much just to save your citizens money on flood insurance, but the CRS is a wonderful book of best practices in the field. And it's, even if you don't join the community rating system, looking at the plans and process of it is incredibly good at reducing your local flood losses. Lots of stuff like the Biggert Waters, like the Mapping Advisory Council, which is not the Big Mac, but it's the Mapping Advisory Council, rate increases. Flood insurance will definitely be a path forward. One of our nation's absolute top demographers is Dr. Arthur Nelson, Chris Nelson. 1/2 of the built environment, the improved square footage that we will see in the year 2050 does not exist today. Think about the implications of this. If all we did for climate adaptation was improve our zoning, our building codes, and our systems such that we built new construction and renovated stuff safely and properly, we would solve our problem 50% in the year 2050. If that's all we did. But we can also do it in an alternative way. We can continue on the path we're on, and we will have a problem that will be at least 50% worse than the mess that we're already in 2050. Oklahoma, what do you think you got for population growth for through 2050? Anybody? No, not 50. Through 50, up through 2050. got 12 over here, I got 12 over here, got 12, 12, 12, going 15, 15, I got 15, I got 15 over there, I just saw your hand move, sir. I got 15 over here, going 15, looking for 20, looking for 20, looking for 20. Got 20 in the back over there, I got 20, 20, 20, looking for 25, looking for 25, 25, 25, 25. Got 25 over there, I got 25 over there, I'm looking for 30, looking for 30, looking for 30, looking for 30. Got 30 in the back, come down and get your ticket. It's 30%. You'll remember that number. I do that for a reason. 30% growth. If we perfectly implement current standards, minimum standards, thank you, sir, damages are going to increase. Following only the minimum standards of the flood insurance program guarantees worse future flood disasters. And I've got an expert witness on that named Bill Robertson. It's guaranteed, folks. Standards aren't quite high enough, even though flood insurance has done incredible things for the nation. We've got to keep these two thoughts in mind. Both Bill's thought, Bill's back in the room again, guarantee of worse damages, guaranteed of worse future disasters. Even though flood insurance has done incredible stuff for the nation, we need to take it a step further. So why are floods getting worse? Well, part of the reason is a fundamental misapprehension. We have certified floodplain managers in the room. I know we've got a couple. Can somebody that's a certified floodplain manager or somebody else please tell me where the floodplain is? This is a standard FEMA flood insurance map. Where's the floodplain on this map? It's clearly shown, by the way. The floodplain is absolutely clearly shown on this map. Sir. Where is it on the map? Where exactly is it shown on the map? Because it's exactly shown. Yes? Everywhere. Mother Nature don't read flood maps. She don't. And she tells us that, and tells us this constantly, time after time. 25% of the flood insurance claims losses in the United States, people who have bought flood insurance, are people outside the dark area, the special flood hazard area. There are numerous limitations on drawing flood maps, everything from what's called clear water flooding to other factors that are not taken into account, including looking only in the past. So where's the floodplain? It's everywhere. And as we change development with improper development that's not designed in a low-impact design fashion, we will make flood disasters worse. Tim Troutman from Charlotte-Mecklenburg can tell you about their mapping of future conditions, floodplains, and show you that they demonstrated in Charlotte-Mecklenburg that with current design practices for building construction outside the special flood hazard area, you would see not a 1 foot rise in flood elevation, you'd see 2, 5, 7 or more feet with just normal building practices. Nothing to do with climate change, nothing to do with climate variability, just changing permeable surfaces to impermeable and other factors. We need to think on a watershed basis. There is a wonderful document on this that was published in the Natural Hazards Review talking about no adverse impact floodplain management. It's a detailed analysis of this. So we need to think about life safety as flood hazards and flood heights increase. Why? Well, public safety issues. How many of you are familiar with the rule of 6 and 9, sometimes referred to also as the rule of 8? Well, you won't be able to say that tomorrow. Rule of 6 and 9, very simply, is you multiply depth of water in feet times the velocity in feet per second. And when you go above 6, you are in an extremely hazardous situation. When you go above 9, you're in swift water rescue. This has to do with analyzing life safety at a site. This is beyond the standards of the flood insurance program. but this has to do with preservation of life safety. And it's very, very important that we, as floodplain managers and emergency managers, understand this when we're sending people in to be rescued from flood waters. We need to understand flood risk equals probability times all the consequences, including misery, suffering, and economic losses. This is a picture of Sacramento. On the right-hand side of the picture is the city of Sacramento, and on the left-hand side is Yolo County farm fields. So what are we doing? Now, this is a levee running down the middle, and it's a levee that's a little bit shaky about how good it is. It actually, local folks have told me that the levee is much better on the farm field side than it is on the city side. Well, the farmers have all this big earth-moving equipment, so they go up there and they shore it up. So what are we doing as a society to change the flood risk for this levee that will inevitably fail or overtop one side or other of the river, maybe both, don't know. What are we currently trying to do as a society with respect to this? We are definitely working on changing the flood risk here. Let me be clear. Absolutely working on it. And what are we doing on this flood risk? Anybody want to guess? We're wildly increasing it. Because what do they want to do over in Yolo County? Subdivisions, building, wonderful stuff to bring in tax revenue and economic development. So whatever the flood risk is now, it will be dramatically different in the future in an area that is protected by a levee that does not meet any standard of engineering excellence in the civilized world, in my professional opinion as an attorney. We have this theory. The Corps of Engineers has pioneered this theory of buying down flood risk management, and it's a wonderful theory. And I applaud the Corps for it. They talk about shared risk, buying down the risk with insurance, building code, zoning, levies, outreach, and the like. But what we are really doing is starting with an initial risk, and because of not having good warning and evacuation plans, because of having upstream development increasing flows, because we have lack of awareness of the flood risk, insufficient amount of purchase of flood insurance, of difference in conditions insurance, critical facilities absolutely not protected from flooding. And by critical facilities, I mean anything from a water and sewer plant to an emergency operations center to a factory or business that is critical to the economic health of a community, to a nursing home, to a hospital, facilities that basically it is simply unacceptable to be flooded or otherwise taken out. And we have infrastructure not being properly designed and maintained, and we end up with a vastly increased risk. That is what we are doing now. At the same time, our design practices treat water as garbage. That's what people are taught to do in engineering school. When you design a parking lot, you get the water off that parking lot just as quick as you can. You don't think about retention and detention, as we see here. And that then, in turn, flushes water off quickly, and we're starving the groundwater. So the idea is to go beyond the federal minimum standards in a way that is in fact affordable. It's a detailed study that talks about mitigation as you retrofit things. There are other studies out there from people like Swiss Re and others that document that there's a minimum of a 10-to-1 payback for safe and proper design over the life of a structure. Choice of development or no development is a false choice. We're going to have development. It's going to be driven by economic pressure. We need to do something differently and better. We need to think about a standard of care. We need to talk a little bit about liability, and we'll be doing that. We need to look at safe development, what the Association of State Floodplain Managers would call no adverse impact, community rating system type stuff. We need to think of collaboration and systems to come up with a better system so that we more appropriately reward people like Tulsa. We need to think in a way, now I'm quoting somebody from the UN, And some of you may be offended by that. I know a lot of people don't think very highly of the UN. And I wish, Albert nodded his head, I wish to God that I could quote a US official saying that disaster risk reduction is not a luxury, that it's something we simply have to have. And I look forward to having somebody that I can say this. We've got to stop making things worse. We've got to think about expenditure of resources in a way that makes things better. Stefan Hallegatt has pioneered this idea of thinking of resilience as this huge circle. And what we can do is a smaller circle, and there's going to be trade-offs, and what we've got to take our resources and focus them in always on something that will be reducing disaster losses. And that simply is not what we are doing. We're expending enormous amounts of money in a way that will not help safety, health, or the economy. Don will be talking more about this in his presentation. I mentioned Tide from the Wind. This is important not just for studies of safe rooms and not just on the wonderful story it tells about what has happened in Oklahoma, but most especially on the path it shows forward for other elements of hazard risk reduction. We've got to come up with common messages. Common message that the flood insurance program is great. It's done a lot of really good stuff. It's tremendously improved our ability to deal with floods, but it needs to take things further, and we can do it at the local level. We can change our idea of what is resilience from what was very common, where we had people that were talking about the smart growth movement that totally ignored natural hazards. Absolutely, totally. Only looked at the rating of a building with respect to its energy efficiency. Now we have some really excellent publications that I really hope you'll read. These are both available online through the NHMA website. One is called Bounce Forward. It was put out by the Kresge Foundation and the Island Press. Excellent, excellent publication that talks not just about disaster risk reduction, but resilience as a whole. And this wonderful publication from the NAACP, written by my friend Jackie Patterson. And she talks about how we can move forward, thinking about the most underrepresented people who really need to be thought about first. So we need this common message. And I've got some thoughts on it. One is safe rooms, higher standards for building construction in areas subject to high winds. That would be known as a building code with higher standards. Wildfire protection. There's lots of stuff that can be done on wildfire protection. And there are experts on this. There's lots that an individual can do and lots that a community do, that a subdivision can do. There's retrofit designs. The California Earthquake Authority doing some magnificent retrofitting designs. The state of California has done some tremendous efforts with respect to unreinforced masonry building. Freeboard. I mean, simple message from Ed Thomas. If you're building in an area of known flood hazards, 4 feet above FEMA BFE ought to be the basis. I don't even want to talk about anything less than that. We need to understand the limits of floodway calculations. We need to understand, as we're doing what Don Watson will talk about as low impact design, we are simultaneously doing stuff to protect water quality, ecosystem services, and threatened and endangered species. So the curriculum is going to be talking about our ability to plan for and absorb adverse events and provide best practices, linkages to folks in the disaster risk reduction, the Resilient Neighbors Network. It's going to be multi-hazard, multidisciplinary, and part of larger efforts. This is America's first political cartoon. This was drawn by Ben Franklin. And he talked about the need for the colonies to unite. We also need to unite. We need to unite across the board emergency managers, floodplain managers, planners, developers, elected officials with a common message of disaster risk reduction that is achievable. The key to the success, the ongoing success of safe rooms in Oklahoma is not a doom and gloom, fire and brimstone message. It is, we can do this. We can work together to do this. We can show you how to do this. We can show you how to achieve disaster risk reduction. And in fact, Tulsa is doing it. We need to unite together. We have a choice as a society. We can either have better standards that will protect people and resources, or alternatively, we cannot. And we can do what we're doing now and make things worse. It's entirely up to all of us together. Comments, questions, thoughts, ideas? Anybody? Sir? How did I, a very fair question, 4 feet of freeboard. I arrived at that from 2 separate studies and an analysis based on those. The first study was by the Wharton School, and it had to do with hurricanes along the Texas coast. Wharton School said way down deep in the study, and I can give you the site, that if people built on the Texas coast with 4 feet of freeboard, they would be able to do private market insurance there. They would so reduce the risks and consequences that they would reduce that. If you I analyzed the FEMA flood insurance rate map, their actual actuarial costs. And if you look at, and now FEMA's doing this based on loss experience, and it's doing it based upon the current way that they calculate the base flood elevation on a flood map. If you look at the savings that can be achieved over 30 years versus the cost per foot of elevation, you're looking at a payback in excess of 15 to 1. I think it's actually, depending upon whether you're on the coastal area or an inland area and what the nature of the flooding is on the river, creek, or stream, I'd use about a 25 to 1 payback. The key is that you're paying today for it, and that's typically a developer, and the payback goes to the occupant in the future. So you have a tremendous impetus to build poorly to put more money in your pocket today as opposed to building safely and properly. But that's how I came up with the 4 feet, was based on those 2 studies. And first I thought 3, and then I kind of threw in another foot for uncertainty and looking at the FEMA stuff. So if you're wondering if I used any type of climate stuff there, I did not. That was just based really on historic stuff with some level of uncertainty. When I did a presentation with Don Watson and someone named Wendy Goldsmith for the Harvard Graduate School of Design, there was somebody who was one of America's most noted architects, by the way, came to that presentation. He said he came 100% because he wanted to figure out how he was going to be designing a subdivision in Houston, and particularly with respect to low-impact development and freeboard. And so I did a much longer presentation for them. And I came up to him and I said, well, what do you think? Are you going to go for 4 feet of freeboard? And he said, absolutely not. And my shoulders slumped. I was sad. And he said, are you kidding? After what I heard from you? 5. After what he heard from me, 5. He said, yeah, I figure that you're on the money there for 4, but he said the extra cost is so inconsequential between BFE and 4 feet, might as well go for 5 feet. And one of the things I had pointed out, as you build higher, particularly in your more scenic floodplain areas, the view is stunning. You get up higher, and man, that view will just blow your socks off.